All right, the legislative branch, also known as Congress. So the legislative branch legislates. That means they're responsible for making the laws. Congress was established in the Constitutional Convention in what's called the Great Compromise. Virginia, during the Constitutional Convention, had their plan where the big population states would rule, and New Jersey had their plan where the small population states would rule. Then Connecticut came up with a compromise called the Great Compromise, whereby you take parts of the New Jersey plan and Virginia plan and put them together. And basically, you would have the small population states and the big population states having to work together through two separate houses of Congress in order to make the laws. So Congress, in the Great Compromise, became bicameral. That means there's two houses, two groups of people. States have equal representation in the Senate, and representation in the House of Representatives is based on population. The House of Representatives, oftentimes just called the House, is the larger of the two groups in the legislative branch of the U.S. government. The House has 435 members, so there's nothing sort of magical about that number. There's a minimum you would have to have as far as the Constitution is concerned, but there's no maximum. So over time, what happened is they sort of kept raising the number of people that could be in the House of Representatives until finally, in the early 1900s, they got to around 435, and they decided, wow, this is getting really big, so we better stop it there. Now, it doesn't really matter what the number is, because since it's based on a state's population, your state is still going to get the same percentage of votes in the House of Representatives, no matter what the numbers. There are 435 voting members in the House, and each member serves a 2-year term. So the entire House of Representatives is up for re-election every 2 years. To be a member of the House of Representatives, you have to be 25 years of age when you take office, and you have to be a citizen for 7 years. Notice that unlike the president, there's no natural born requirement, so you don't have to be born in the United States for the House of Representatives, which means you can come from another country, basically become naturalized in the United States and get U.S. citizenship, live here for 7 years, and run. And if you're elected, you'll be making laws for this new country that you have adopted or have come to become a citizen in. So there have been quite a number of people in the House, and as we'll see in the Senate as well, who have not been born in the United States or not even born to U.S. parents, and they have come here and if they've immigrated here, and later they're making laws for the United States. So, and also notice that the requirement for age is a lot less than the president. The president is 35, the House member is 25, and there's also the residency requirement. It's only 7 years in the House, and it's 14 years to the president. So they realize there's going to be a lot more House members than there are presidents. They want to make the president a little bit more mature than the House members, and want the president to have a little bit more experience with the laws and the people of the United States than a House member would have. But you can be 24 or something when you run for office, but you can't take office until you're 25 to be a member of the House of Representatives. Now, the leader of the House, who has quite a bit of power, is called the Speaker of the House. They speak for the House of Representatives. And usually the Speaker of the House is the one of the leaders of the majority party. When the House of Representatives, the new House, begins every 2 years, the members hold a vote, and because it's now split into Republicans and Democrats, basically the Republicans hold a vote for their leaders, the Democrats hold a vote for their leaders, and whoever has the most members in the House of Representatives, they usually all get together and vote as a block so they can elect one of their own party members as leader. So the current Speaker of the House is Nancy Pelosi. Since the current House has more Democrats than it has Republicans. Here, of course, in the blue, you see the Democrats, and in the red, you see the Republicans. And there's one every now and then in the House, you get like a third political party, the Libertarian Party or some other type of party. Sometimes you have maybe even 2 or 3 members in the House that aren't either Republicans or Democrats. Sometimes they call themselves independent, but they often vote with the Republicans or they vote with the Democrats. So the Senate is smaller. That is, it has less members in the House. Instead of 435 members, the Senate has 100 members. And this is based on a state's, not population, but simply on being a state. In the Constitutional Convention, the Great Compromise, part of the Great Compromise, was that every state would have equal representation in the Senate. They would have 2 votes in the Senate for every state, no matter how many people you have in your state. So if you have 40 million people in your state, like California, you get 2 senators. If you have Texas with 30 million, you have 2 senators. If you have Wyoming with about 1 million people, you have 2 senators. Every state gets 2 senators, 2 votes in the Senate. And each member serves 6 years. So the terms are rather staggered in the Senate. Only about 1/3 of the Senate is up for re-election every 2 years. So over a 6-year span, you would theoretically be able to get an entirely new Senate. Of course, in the House of Representatives, theoretically every 2 years you could get an entire new House of Representatives. But that's never happened. And usually people who have already served in the House or people who have served in the Senate, they usually continue serving in the House and Senate for quite a number of years. In other words, they get re-elected because becoming an incumbent, becoming a member of the House and Senate, that means the people back home that elected you, they often hear your name, they often see you on television, and you have a lot of name recognition. So when the next election comes up, people that go to the polls often recognize your name. And so incumbents in Congress, people already there, oftentimes get reelected. Not always, but oftentimes. So to be a member of the Senate, you have to be a little older than the House member. You have to be 30 years. Of course, that's not quite as old as you have to be president at 35. And again, for the a residency requirement in the United States, it's sort of between the president and the House members. House member 7 years, president 14 years, and for the Senate it's 9 years that you need to be a resident of the United States. Again, notice there's no natural born qualification for the Senate. So again, you can immigrate to this country from any place on earth and become a citizen, live here for 9 years, and you can run for office, and if elected, you'll be helping run the United States, a place that you have moved to and have adopted as your home country, which is really good because there are many nations in the world that really don't allow that, that basically you have to be born there. They really don't trust anybody from outside to help make laws for their country, but the United States is certainly an exception to that rule. So the constitutional leader in the Senate, under the Constitution, the president of the Senate is the vice president of the United States. However, under the Constitution, the president of the Senate, the vice president of the United States, doesn't have much power. Really, the only power the vice president would have is to cast a tie-breaking vote. So 50 senators were voting for a law, 50 senators were voting against law. The vice president, in his capacity as president of the Senate, could vote to break the tie. But that does not happen very often because there's usually not a tie in the Senate. So even though the vice president is constitutionally called the president of the Senate, the real power, basically the person that really runs the Senate and basically decides what proposed laws are going to be voted on and how the Senate's going to proceed, that person is called the majority leader. And the majority leader is the head of the majority party. So again, from the Republicans, Democrat, whoever has the most votes, they elect a leader, and that leader is called the majority leader. And here you see currently in the Senate, the Republicans have just a few more votes than Democrats, which means the Republicans are in the majority, and therefore they have elected one of their own, Mitch McConnell from Kentucky, as the majority leader. And so as the majority leader, he has more votes. He has over 50% of the votes, which, of course, in the House and Senate, if you have over 50% of the vote, you basically run the place. Although there are a lot of rules and regulations for the House because there are really 435 people, you have to, it's really hard to get all of them sort of talking on one subject at once. So there's a lot of procedural practices in place in the House. They're less in the Senate. With only 100 senators, you have more time to speak. You have more time to make your point across. So there's less procedural hurdles in the Senate than there are in the House of Representatives. And also, oftentimes in the Senate, you might have a third party. They could be called different things. Sometimes they just call themselves independent. But again, the independents usually vote with either the Republicans or Democrats. Right now, there's two independents in the Senate. The most well-known is Bernie Sanders from Vermont, but he votes with the Democrats. So the major job of Congress is to make laws and to raise and spend money through taxes. Because if you make a law but don't actually give any money to enforce the law, usually the law does not get obeyed. So if you make a law that says you're going to build a new highway from Houston, Texas to Washington, D.C., but you don't provide any money for it, the highway doesn't get built. So equally as important as passing a law is passing the appropriations, passing the money that goes with the law. Now, Congress does have other things it does besides making laws and providing money for those laws and raising money and spending money. It also has other constitutional powers like declaring war, impeaching and trying federal officials. So they can impeach not just the president, but anybody that works for the federal government. Congress can bring up on charges, and if found guilty in the Senate by 2/3 vote, they can be kicked out. That includes fellow House members and senators. It includes judges in the judicial branch, and of course it includes anybody in the executive branch as well. And of course, as we saw yesterday, they approve presidential appointments. Congress approves treaties, and Congress also has oversight over many things because, after all, they supply the money to the executive branch to carry out the laws, and they want to make sure that money is well spent. So there's many groups in Congress that basically keep track of how that money is being spent, and if there's a question about whether the money is being spent well, they'll call people in from the executive branch to answer questions and see if the money is being spent well and seeing if the law is being enforced. So there are some laws, according to the Constitution, Congress cannot pass. So in Article 1, Section 9, first of all, they can't suspend habeas corpus except in time of warfare, except in time of invasion. So that means if you're arrested and thrown in jail, the government actually has to tell the judge why you're being kept there. They have to show, they have to have a reason, they have to show something to a judge that will rationalize why the government has put you in jail. And the judge, they have to convince the judge that they might have a case against you before, and otherwise the judge will order you to be free. So under the Constitution, Congress cannot suspend that right unless basically there's a rebellion or unless we're being invaded. Under Clause 3, you can't, Congress can't pass a law to declare someone guilty of a crime. That is, criminal laws have to apply to everyone equally. They can't just apply to one person. And this comes from our English heritage, because way back in English heritage, the British Parliament, if they didn't like someone, they simply passed a law against that person, declaring the person illegal and basically throwing them in jail for breaking the law of being themselves. So Congress can't pass those sorts of laws. And they can't pass what they call ex post facto laws. That means once the law is passed, it takes effect. You can't violate a law before you know what the law is, before the law is actually passed. So criminal laws passed by Congress can only apply from the time they're passed. They can't apply to your previous actions before then. I mean, I know it sounds silly, but again, in our British history, Parliament, the British lawmaking bodies, could do that. They could actually make something illegal that you did in the past, even though it wasn't illegal when you did it. Our Congress is prevented from doing that. Also, Congress can't tax things being sold from state to state. Now, states can tax it, but Congress can't. And of course, Congress can't tax exports, things going out of the country. That they basically, again, can't tax things going from one state port to another state port. No money in the federal government can be spent unless Congress authorizes that money. Congress also can't give anyone a title of nobility. Again, this comes from our English heritage, where British Parliament rewarded people that did favors by the king or for the king by giving those people a wonderful, awesome title. Who wouldn't be, Lord Beck? Has a nice ring to it. Prince Beck, King Beck. But our Congress can't do those sorts of things. They can't award a title of nobility to people. And also, no officer of the United States, by working for the United States, can accept a title from any other government. So another government can't make you a prince, or they can't make you a lord either. Sorry. Interesting though, you can actually call yourself prince or lord in this country. There might be a state law against it, but there's no national law. You can call yourself that, but Congress can't grant any formal titles. So what Congress can do is described in Section 8. And in Section 8, there's basically some things they can do in peacetime and some things they can do in wartime. In peacetime, they can basically raise tax money. They can raise and spend tax money. They can borrow money. They can regulate foreign and interstate commerce. That is, they can make laws about what goes on between the states and what states might send overseas or what you might bring in the country. They can make naturalization laws. That is, they can make laws about when immigrants come into the country, maybe how long they have to stay before they become citizens. Congress can create bankruptcy laws, national bankruptcy laws, not state bankruptcy laws. Congress can coin money. That is, they can make money. They can punish counterfeiters. They can establish post offices. They can grant patents and copyrights. They can create courts that are inferior to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was created by the Constitution, and then basically the writer said, well, we've created the Supreme Court. If Congress wants more, they can make them themselves, and gave that power to Congress. And Congress can define and punish crimes at sea and violations of international law. Congress exercise exclusive jurisdiction over the District of Columbia and other federal properties. So Washington, D.C. is not a state. It's a special district. And even though right now it sort of operates much like a city where they elect a mayor and things like that, that's only because Congress lets them do that. So theoretically, Congress could basically fire the mayor of D.C. and fire the city council, and basically Congress could run it themselves, and they have in the past. But that's up to Congress. And clause number 18 is really awesome. It says to make all laws necessary and proper to the execution of any of the express powers. So basically, it says you can do anything you need to do in order to do numbers 1 through 17. That is, whatever law you're passing from 1 through 17, whatever you need to make that law work, you can do it. So if you're establishing a post office, what do you need to establish a post office? Well, stamps. So Congress can basically create laws about creating stamps and how much they're worth and how much it takes to send a letter from place to place. How about delivering the mail? Because if you have mail, you might want to, give it to the people that it's sent to. Well, in that case, how are you going to get it from the post office to the people's houses? Well, mail trucks. But nowhere in the Constitution does it say that Congress can buy trucks to take the mail from the post office to your house. But clause number 18 gives them that right. Because basically, in order to create the post office, you need to do all those other things to make the post office work. So it's called the necessary and proper clause, and it really gives Congress a lot of authority. Just like regulating foreign trade and interstate trade gives Congress a lot of authority over a lot of stuff. So there's certain laws Congress can't pass, and there's certain laws that it can pass. So how does it pass the law? Well, most of the work of Congress is carried out in committees. In the House and in the Senate, they divide themselves up into smaller groups, just like at school. Just like at school, I don't know how many students we have offhand, but if there's 800 and something students at school, you can't get all of them together at one time because there'll probably be chaos. Instead, we've divided them up into two grades, 7th grade and 8th grade, much like the House of Representatives and the Senate. And then in both grades, we divide them up even further into subject matters, into classrooms. So we divide them up into 7 periods, and you have math, and you have science, and you have history, and so forth. And those individual classrooms, in Congress, they would be called committees. The subject like history or the subject like math that you go to every day, that would be called a committee, because they take Congress up, they divide it. Of course, Congress is divided into 2 groups, the House and the Senate, and in each one, they're divided basically up into subjects, which are called committees, and that helps them create laws, because it's easier to sort of create a law in a small group, and then once you're finished sort of making that law and writing all the stuff down that you need to do, then you bring it to the big group and say, hey, look, this is what we've done. What do you guys think about it now? And then everyone can vote on it. So most of the work of Congress is done in committees. So you see the list here of the committees. And of course, they range basically almost anything that we Americans have an interest in. Of course, agriculture, which means farms and food, etc. Appropriations, which means spending money, raising money. Armed services, the military, the budget, how much money we're going to spend in the government. Education speaks for itself. Energy and commerce, business. You have natural resources, financial services, foreign affairs, homeland security, intelligence. So almost any subject you can matter. Okay, you want to buy an aircraft carrier for the U.S. Navy. Where are you going to send that? Well, you'll probably send it to the Armed Services Committee in the House of Representatives. Or maybe you want to create new special courts to hear certain type of court cases. Where's that law going to be created? Well, probably in the Judiciary Committee. Well, how about laws about former military people, trying to take care of them medically and perhaps giving them a few more benefits? Where is that law going to be crafted? Well, probably in the Veterans Affairs Committee. You want to create a special like spaceship that go to the moon and back carrying people? That'd be awesome. I wonder what committee that'll be in. Well, probably the Space, Science, and Technology Committee. So in almost anything you can think of, Congress will send your idea to one of these committees, and then the committees will work on that and craft a law, and then they will send it to the full House of Representatives or the full Senate to vote on it. We'll look more carefully how laws are crafted at a later time. So Congress is an important aspect. The legislative branch obviously is a very important aspect of our national government, creating national laws that we all have to obey, which are enforced by the executive branch or interpreted by the judicial branch. And Congress, again, divided into 2 houses, the House and the Senate. Membership in each one is a little bit different, and there are a little bit different number of members in each one. But both of them have to work together in order to make the laws.